Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Swati Taneja, and as a Training Production Director within Forma, I'm delighted to welcome all our attendees today on an informative webinar on talent management in the GCC. The webinar will be led by Lesley Harvey, and before we start the webinar, I'd like to take you through a couple of housekeeping rules for the next 45 minutes.
Skills and capabilities of our people to meet current and future demands. What we're looking at there is being able to have a set of competencies, again, both technical and behavioral, that allow us to build the capability. So what we're really saying here is we need to identify what great looks like through identifying technical and behavioral competencies, by having very sound job descriptions, and by having a career development program in place that allows us to develop those people against that criteria. The key here is that we're looking at being able to develop people to meet our current and our future demands. And that's why talent management is a feeder into our succession planning process, and in turn is fed by our career development process. So you can start to see that across HR now, talent management allows us to have a cross-functional within HR capability of identifying and developing that talent, and for that to be fed into a mechanism for deploying. So we deploy through a number of things. We deploy through our succession management program. We deploy through our nationalization program. We deploy through our current needs. Vacancies occur naturally through natural attrition, through growth, through change. Numbers of reasons there that are not necessarily affected by succession management. So deployment now is placing the right people in the right jobs with the right skills at the right time to meet the organization's needs. We also need to look at it in terms of being able to support an individual's career growth. We know that in order to retain talent, one of the key drivers of retention, both for pretty much everybody across the organization, is the opportunity for career growth. And that's also one of the major drivers of engagement. So deployment is one of the key success factors within any talent management program. Without the opportunity to deploy, what we do is raise people's expectations and then don't deliver against those expectations. So understanding that talent management is there for a purpose, to fill a talent pipeline with people that are ready, willing and able to do the jobs that the organization needs them to do when they're needed. So it doesn't automatically give people a right to a job or a right to a future, but what it does is give them the opportunity for that. And then the final box, as you'll see, is engagement. So if we've spent a lot of time, effort and money on identifying, developing and then starting to deploy, we then need to make sure that those individuals are engaged. So we capture both their hearts and minds. And we do that by ensuring that the environment within our organization is appropriate for those people with the talents that we need to deliver the best job that they've ever done, to achieve the best potential that they want to achieve. And those things are quite critical. Engaged employees are people that feel passionate about the organization in which they work and the job that they do. And they want to do a great job. They also know that they are enabled to reach their potential, and they're enabled to deliver the best job that they can do. So it's in everyone's interests to do that. Interestingly, some recent research shows that for every 1 point improvement in our engagement score, and those of you that run engagement or satisfaction surveys will know what I mean by an engagement score. For every 1 point change, you can expect between 11 and 12% performance improvement. So in terms of the return on the investment, if you look at driving engagement as part of your talent management strategy, the likely return on the investment is enormous. So remember, 1 point improvement in engagement score equates to between 11 and 14% improvement in performance. Now, for any organisation, you can't turn down a potential 14% performance improvement. That would deliver a huge value add to any organisation. So what tells us that we need talent management? That's the first question. So if we're looking at talent management and we say this is going to cost us money, it's going to cost us a lot of effort to put together and design a talent management program. We need to train people to be able to do it. We need to communicate what talent management means to our employees and to our line managers. Remember, line managers own the execution of this. HR will facilitate the process. If we need to do that, we need to understand that there is a driving need for that. And part of the things that we could look at, some of the clues that we might get, is that we have key roles, critical roles, that are unfilled for long periods. So although we're looking internally for it, we don't have the skills, and we're looking externally, and it's also taking us a long time to fill those roles. That's telling us that maybe we should be looking at talent management to plan for our future so that this thing doesn't happen again. If we frequently have a need to hire from outside on a very quick basis, so emergency outside hires, so that typically would occur when you've got someone that has left unexpectedly, which questions your retention practices, and you've got nobody in your succession pipeline, and that means you've got to have a knee-jerk. You've got to get someone in on board very quickly. So one of those things then, that's another clue that it's saying we need some help here. And talent management would reduce the numbers of time that we need to do emergency hiring. If we look at where our recruitment is coming from, where are we filling those key roles from? And if the answer is mostly from the outside, that impacts retention, it impacts engagement, it impacts cost, it impacts perception, it impacts the ability to hire from outside. Because if it's known that most successful hires come from outside, well, the message we're giving to the outside world is that we don't have growth opportunities inside. And that's a dangerous perception. So if most of our key roles are filled from the outside, not from inside, then it's telling us again that we need to do something about our talent pipeline. So another reason for having or establishing a talent management process. If we have unsuccessful replacements, whether they're internal or external, it's telling us that our criteria for hiring may not be very good. Maybe we're not grooming from the inside, and maybe that's telling us something different. If we're getting lots of complaints about opportunities for promotion or decisions on promotion being unfair, again, that's telling us to look at the process. It's telling us maybe we should be looking at this. Because what people are really telling us is that you're not developing us to be ready, you're not identifying us when these vacancies occur, and we're not ready to take on those vacancies. So we need to be looking at that. And the other one is loss of customer confidence. Now that's the big ticket one. This is has an impact on your share price if you're a listed company. And if you're not, it has an impact on your reputation. And if your reputation is damaged, it would damage your ability to recruit and to attract great people to look at your organization. If you think about, there's been a number of incidents of that happening. One incident was for a major global bank that lost its CEO. And they had to announce that to the world. And that in itself created a wobble. People would look at that and think, well, they've lost their CEO, what's going to happen next? But unfortunately what happened, they then announced that they had no successor. They had nobody that was ready to step into the shoes of that CEO. And as a result, because they were a listed company, their share price plummeted. The customer reaction to that was significant. There was a lack of confidence in this bank's ability to pick itself up and run. And as a result, the recovery from that position took far longer than it would have had they been able to say, We've lost our CEO, but our succession management process and our talent management process is such that we have a secondary person ready and able to step into those shoes immediately. So loss of customer confidence, loss of stakeholder confidence has a very big impact, particularly if we are listed. So we need to be thinking about the broader picture. Where do we get our talent? Where do we feed our talent pools from? Inside as well as outside. Where do we want to recruit people from, both inside and outside? So that reputation management is quite critical. So if we know that, then we start to look at validating those decisions. And what does that mean from an organization perspective? It means if we have talent management, we know who our critical resources are. Who are our top talent? Who are they at director or leadership level? Who are they at functional leader level? Who are they at senior management level? And who are they at transformational change leadership level? So at the very top of the organization. Once we identify that, we've got a target to aim for. So now we can profile those leaders and start to say, well, if we want to feed people into that future leadership pipeline, we know what great looks like. We can role model them. We can create a competence map that says we now know what the target looks like at all levels of leadership within our organization. And once we have that started at the top, we then start to embed talent management further into the organization. Now, companies that have got talent management and have had it for quite some time, so mature organizations, companies like Shell, companies, big companies that have been in existence for 30, 40, 50, 60 years, have talent management embedded right to the bottom of the organization, from bottom to top. They have feeders into their talent management program at all levels. Companies that are just starting tend to start at the top and then spread downwards. Why? Because it makes sense that your critical resource is usually your senior leadership team, your executive leadership team, and then starts to look at critical roles within the organization before spreading further. Now, depending on the business outcomes that you're looking for, whether it's an emeritization program that's driven the talent management to be established, whether it's that there was a lack of succession planning, or whether there is career development but nowhere for them to go, or whether it's that there is a push to modernize HR and start to expand the HR offering so that it is more integrated, is what you need to decide. And those outcomes will determine how big your program is and how deep it goes into the organization and how quickly it becomes established. So if we look at strategy now, and in particular talent management strategy, everything starts from strategy, as I'm sure all of you know. Whether it's business, whether it's operational planning, whatever it is starts from strategy. And talent strategy is no different. And when we talk about talent strategy, what we mean is a plan to meet the strategic talent needs of a business that will create a competitive advantage through differentiating people's capabilities. And what we're saying here is that we understand that nowadays, in the world as it is, many organizations can copy a product, they can copy a service, they can copy a competency model. You can cut and paste it and take it to somewhere else. It won't work very well, but you can do that. The differentiator with any organization now is around talent, is around the people. And therefore, talent management is about the strategic opportunity to use, to give a company a competitive advantage through differentiating its people, saying we know that there are groups of people within our organization that are our high-performing, high potentials that will deliver that differentiation. And typically, as most of you will know, Pareto's law says the 80-20 rule probably will apply. 20% of our people will be delivering 80% of our capability. That being said, we still have a whole bunch of people that we need. They're the backbone of the organization. We talk about them within performance management. When we look at our performance distribution, we're looking at 70% of the organisation being backbone, probably 2 to 3% being our high potential high performers, and the rest spread amongst the rest. So when we look at that, we're not saying that that 70% is no longer valid. Of course they are. But we need to be looking at where our future leadership is coming from that will give us that strategic advantage through differentiating us. And those are the ones that we focus on within talent management as our first step. And so what talent strategy isn't, is not simply how HR will deliver a whole bunch of services. It's not how HR will deliver the latest buzzword or the latest HR thinking. It's not a plan for HR development. And it's not recruitment, training, and so on. It doesn't encompass all of those things. And it's not a plan for internal hires. It's an end-to-end strategy that takes the business through a process that will create a competitive advantage. So, as a consequence to that, what it's telling us is that as talent management practitioners, we first need to understand the business. Very often, we don't have the time or the opportunity to really get down into the business detail. But in order for talent management to work, we need to dig deep. And we need to find out what's happening inside as well as outside. Only then will you be clear on what a talent management strategy needs to look like. So when I talk about digging deep, what we mean here is doing a thorough SWOT analysis on the organisation. Doing analysis and getting an understanding of where we're going, what's our mission, what's our vision, what's our business strategy, what's the short and long-term operational business plan. So what are we doing in the next 12 to 18 months, and what do we think we're going to be doing for the next 5 years? And what impact does that have in terms of people? It also requires us to do the analysis on our current level of talent. So in other words, right now we would be able to look into our performance management process and say, who have we got that's high performing? That doesn't yet tell us who's our high potential, but it does tell us where we could start looking. So we start looking within our high performing individuals. Then we say, what's happening in the market? What are our competitors doing? What are our stakeholders doing? And what are those other people doing with whom we compete for talent? So they may not be direct competitors in the same market as us, but they may well be recruiting from the same pools as us. So similarities, for example, if you're currently in the oil and gas industry, you'll find your people are being poached by the nuclear industry right now, and vice versa. Because the oil and gas industry in the region is quite well pronounced, they're a natural target for pretty much everybody, because you have such well-development processes that it makes it a very attractive proposition. So non-core, if you're looking at marketing, you're looking at engineering, you're looking at IT, you're looking at HR, it's a natural target because they will have very well-developed processes in place. So once we start to understand what the business is trying to do, where it's going, where are our hotspots, where's our critical resource requirement, what talent do we find difficult to manage, what talent do we find difficult to find, if we've got turnover, where is that coming from? And why is it coming? What's happening? What are we not doing in the organisation that means people are leaving us? How can we understand that? It also requires us as HR practitioners to act as marketeers. It says let's segment our population and find out if what we're hearing is true for all of our segments. Because what attracts one group may not attract another group. What retains one group will not be the same for another group. So if we think about segmenting our population into millennials, into Generation Y, X and Y, if we look at our aging population, all of them will have different needs from a development perspective, from a retention perspective, and from a satisfaction perspective. What do they enjoy about the job? What do they enjoy about the organisation? So what that requires us to do is to segment those populations and start to ask the question, what do we need to do? If that's where our talent, our future talent is and our current talent is, what do we need to do to be able to develop them effectively, but more importantly, hold on to them if we do? So talent management strategy encompasses how do we attract them in, what's our value proposition for them, how do we keep them if we've got them, what will motivate them to work, what's the leadership requirement and what's the organisation requirements that will keep them happy and make them contribute, enable them to contribute, and what's our talent management strategy then that starts to say how do we identify those people that are our high performing, high potential, the future for our organisation. More importantly, what it also allows us to do is develop the tools that will identify our gaps. How do we identify our current talent strength? How do we identify where the gaps are within our organisation that we need to fill within talent management? So understanding the business is a critical element of setting up talent management in our organisation. And it's the one probably in my consulting role that I see most often not done well enough. We, as HR practitioners, tend to dive straight in and get operational. And what we actually need is to take a step back and look at the business as a whole in order to understand the business need and the business outcomes so that we know how we can measure our success after the first year in order to make adjustments to the process should we need to. It also now allows us to identify the tools that we're going to need and to make a decision around whether we have them right now or whether we need to develop them first. So it helps us to understand budget and timescales. If we look at talent management strategy, one of the other things that we think about is that when we first start, are we going to have an exclusive or an inclusive strategy? Exclusive meaning that it tends to be an ad hoc type process, so it's limited to certain individuals, no specific talent areas, informal processes. And an inclusive strategy tends to be formalized process. It's open to everyone to apply or be nominated into. There are numbers of specific pools, and the process is clear and transparent rather than closed and development only offered to a chosen few. Now you can already guess, I'm sure, that an exclusive strategy tends to be one where you're starting this. You might do a pilot study, or you might be doing it for a specific process, for a specific purpose. You may have a problem right now in turnover, and you may want to do some talent management as a short-term fix. But longer term, what we're looking at is an inclusive strategy, one that has clearly defined processes, clearly defined policies, and tends to be open to everyone. And I think you'll all understand that that's pretty critical. So if we look at now a talent management strategy framework, it's clear from what I've said, it tends to look like this. So first thing, we determine why we're doing it. What are the business outcomes that we're looking for? So we understand the business-specific imperatives that have made us think we need talent management, and we've turned those into objectives that are linked to business success, that are quantifiable, that have KPIs, key performance indicators, attached to them, some kind of metrics. The second stage is to have talent outcomes. And this is a broad set of people-related needs and outcomes aligned to what the business needs. So if we say, if we want talented individuals to join our talent management program, we need to understand what the needs are from a people perspective to get them to join. And they need to be aligned to our business needs. We need the metrics, as we've already talked about. And we need to have identified what behaviours we're looking for that makes those people successful. So key leadership or management behaviours and management practices that lead to great talent outcomes. We need to define what great looks like. And most commonly, that's done within a leadership competency framework. Usually behavioural, but could be technical as well. The most critical at leadership level is behaviours. And then finally, we need the programs and tools that make this happen. And the most common let me think. The confusion right now that I see within HR departments is talent management a program or is it a department? And the answer is it can be both. Talent management is a program, but if you're a big organization, you will need a department to manage the program. That doesn't mean that talent management owns recruitment. It doesn't own succession management. It doesn't necessarily own development. It doesn't own any of those things. It doesn't own policy. What it does, it owns the program, and that program pulls in those other elements from the other departments within HR. So talent management impacts recruitment. It impacts selection. It impacts development. It has requirements. It buys services from development. It impacts retention, and it impacts assessment tools, competency models, performance management, but it doesn't necessarily own them. However, talent management will own the assessment centres specifically designed to feed talent pools. So it's not a department necessarily, but it could be. So talent management as a process then starts with identifying the strategic intent, as we've already said, identifying the key people capability requirements that the business needs, identifying talent and identifying our talent pools. So two aspects there. We're identifying who our key talent are, and the second one is to identify which talent pool, if we have multiples, do they go in. And then it's around identifying specific strategies for each of those pools. So for example, if we've got a leadership talent pool, what specific strategies do we need to utilize to develop talent within those pools, to retain talent in those pools, and to attract talent into them? The next level, develop and deploy that talent. So now we start to say if we're using what methodologies are we using to develop them? What methodologies are we using to deploy them? What promises are we making to people that are in our talent pools for deployment? And that requires us to look at our policies. Is it a guarantee? If when you come into a talent management process, is it a guarantee of a role? Is it one-on-one succession management that it feeds into? Is it one-on-one emeritization that it feeds into? Do we promise timescales, or do we promise the potential for being considered as and when opportunities arise? And the last example I gave is the more likely outcome. Making promises to people that guarantees them a job through going through a talent management process doesn't necessarily help anybody, because you don't have an idea of when those jobs are going to become available, nor do you have a firm idea of when that talent that you're developing is going to be ready for deployment. You would be able to have a rough plan, but people develop at different stages and at different timescales. Depending on how big their talent gap is, will drive the timescales for their development. So you might identify someone that has high performance right now and has the potential for future leadership. However, the talent gap, the gap in their behavioral competency is such that within your organization, it may well take 4 or 5 years to fulfill that gap. If an opportunity comes up sooner than that, they won't be ready. So they won't be ready for consideration. So we need to make sure that when we are developing talent and we are identifying them, that we're very clear on the proposition. We're very clear that we're giving people an opportunity to be considered and a much higher likelihood of being selected, but not a guarantee. If we move then to motivation and retention of that talent, part of motivation will come from understanding that proposition, understanding what's in it for me for belonging to the talent management program and what's in it for the organization. More importantly, it's about us as HR professionals understanding what motivates people and what retains them. And as we said at the outset, retention is different for each individual and probably for each talent group. So if you look at a new graduate program and you've got young individuals in there, 22, 23, 24, the motivating factors and the retention factors for them will be quite different from someone that's in a leadership development pool and that are further through their career. So they're in their 40s or late 30s or mid-30s. They will have a different set of criteria. So it's important for us to understand that motivation and retention happens differently at different stages of the talent management continuum. And at the end of the process, we need to have an opportunity to evaluate that process and to review its success. Talent management is an annual process, so we build in evaluation and review at regular opportunities. So at the end of the process, maybe at the midway point, maybe on a quarterly basis, depending. When you first identify it, when you first implement, I would be saying review it on a quarterly basis. Once you have an established program, I'd be saying review it on an annual program and make your adjustments accordingly. Critical to success of being able to evaluate and review is identifying a strategic intent at the outset and identifying your critical metrics at the outset. Otherwise, it's difficult to know what you're evaluating. So what are your success criteria? Identify them at the beginning, because that's what you're going to evaluate at the end. Now, you've heard me talk several times now about performance and potential. So looking at high-performing, high-potential talent, those ones, the 80-20 rule, the 20% of staff that have the potential to be one of the lucky 5% that get to leadership, or strategic leadership, there is a model for that now. There are some tools that you can use, but typically we're looking at it's split into two. You use the performance management process to identify high performance. What that tells us is we need a really robust performance management process, one that identifies delivery of objectives and behaviors, identifies the behavioral standards that we want. So we look at, is the behavior consistent with the values of the organization and the standards of the organization? And B, we look at track record. Do they have a track record of delivering results, both within your organization and before they joined? So do they have a history of being a high-performing individual? We look at that within our performance management. Do they deliver the objectives that they get? Do they deliver on their KPIs? Do they deliver on whatever objectives or goals that they've agreed to at the beginning of the performance year? And have they done that consistently over a period of time? In terms of potential, what we look at there is, do they personally aspire to a more senior role? If someone doesn't actually want to be developed, it's not the right time for them, then we don't need to be looking at it. And the second aspect is, have they got what it takes to be stretched to get into a more complex role? So those are the two elements, and typically we review that through talent review processes. So what I've given you there is a slide that says, how do we identify it through structured questionnaires and a bunch of things that we've just talked about. So it's there as a reminder to you of what we've just discussed. We can also use a 9-box grid, and what we use that for is to plot those people within our organization that we believe could be considered for entry into our talent management program. 9-box grids are organizational specific, so the example that you have on your screens right now is one that was developed by me for a bank. It's the descriptors, so the title of each box, so if you look at box 5, solid contributor, box 8, rising star, box 9, top talent, they tend to stay the same, but the criteria for entry into that is organization specific. Your high potential, high performing future leaders come from box 9 and box 8. They're really the two that you're looking for. Box 7 is an emerging potential but not proven yet. So box 8 and box 9 are the ones that are proven. They're the ones that you would look at, and they're usually identified through what we call talent reviews, which are round table discussions that HR facilitate with line managers using performance data and observational data, when we watch what they're doing, what individuals are doing, and it's by nomination. So a line manager may nominate one of their people for consideration, It goes into the talent review, it's plotted into the 9-box grid, and a discussion is had. So success for talent management depends on a number of things. For every role or destination, the competencies and skills to be required. For each person, there to be a development plan in place, that an appraisal process is complete, that they have a personal plan in place. We need to think about an internal talent market. Do we have a process where people can apply or be nominated into a talent pool? And each individual, therefore, needs to make people aware that they would like to be considered. They also need to be doing a good job at the time to be considered. So it's not a lobbying. It's not a matter of being said, I want to be in, but I'm not actually a high performer. But look, if you put me in, I will be. It's not the way this works. So we need to think about our process and the way we communicate it. And as I've said before, one size isn't the same for everybody. It doesn't fit everybody. So talent management strategy is organization specific. Talent identification is again organization specific and needs to be carefully planned. Development interventions are tailored to the specific organization and to the specific talent pools that you have. Succession and career development need to be aligned with talent management. So we need to think really carefully when we develop a program and when we are implementing it, or what it looks like for our organization. And then there is a link from talent management, a natural link, as we said before, into succession management. So succession planning is the systematic approach to building a leadership pipeline, to develop potential successors that fits them and fits the organization. So it means that we concentrate our resources in ensuring that we have a pipeline of people ready to take on critical roles and our leadership positions. So the purpose is exactly that. Ensures the organization has sufficient talent coming through. So not one-on-one, tends to be 2 or 3 at least people that have the potential for being considered when a senior role becomes vacant. The idea of succession planning is to develop future leaders. It links to nationalization programs if you have a plan to emeritize through succession management. But it's not the same as emeritization or nationalization. It forms part of our overall attraction and retention strategy. So it's important. So if we want to have successful talent management, communicating that it links to our succession program and that it links to our emeritization program and is fed by our career development program will help us to attract and retain people that we've invested very heavily in. So integrating it helps us to means that we would need to identify our target positions, use our competency framework, and develop our links from talent pools. So talent retention then, important. Series of things that impact it, not just one. Engagement, induction, policy, values, rewards, recognition, and management. And so what we need to understand that if we have very satisfied employees, that they will deliver better value to us. We know that if we have happy chickens, they lay a lot more eggs. We know that happy cows give more milk. And we know that if we take care of our vegetables, they give us far more yield per acre or per volume. And we know that valued workers, those that are engaged with us, give us greater returns. Talent management drives engagement. So remember, 1 point change in engagement will give us between 11 and 14% return on that investment. So having talent management driving engagement, looking for development, will give us a far greater return. That was a bit of a whistle-stop tour of talent management. Clearly, lots of us will have questions. I'd welcome those questions, and I will take them in turn as they've appeared on my screen. If any of you have got any other questions, please do start posting them now. In terms of, so one person's asked us around the source of the data for the improvement of the engagement score. We'll circulate that information afterwards. This, off the top of my head, I don't have it in front of me, but I do have that data and I will give it to you. We'll put it in the information pack afterwards. Other question, Osama, you've asked, is there a difference in engagement for the talent pool than that for the rest of the employees? And the answer is no. I think engagement is the same. When we measure engagement, we may segment the results of our engagement survey and look specifically at the talent those that are in the talent pool. So remember, when you do an engagement survey, you can segment the results. You can segment it by department, by division, by section. You could, so therefore, it is possible to segment that data for those people that are in the talent pools and to look at that specifically. What I would suggest you would do in that case is when you before you deploy your engagement survey, once you look at your engagement survey provider, you'd have that discussion with them and you'd start to say, we'd like to segment one of the questions around our talent pool, and they will be able to do that for you. Most organizations do this offline now, so understanding that it's important to be able to tell your provider that's what you want to be able to do with the data is important. We've got another question as well. Since there's no guarantee for deployment of that development talent, is there any market figures on retention rates? I don't know, but I can have a look. But it is known that one of the things that drives retention is the opportunity for development. And remember, we don't develop just to stay still. So it's in a company's interest to develop people in line with business strategy, which is why it's so important to understand growth, why it's so important to understand business strategy. If the business has no likelihood of being able to deploy, then it would be meaningless to have talent management. So it answers the question around why we have talent management, why we have a talent management strategy. The first question is, do we need it? If we have it, do we have the opportunity to deploy? Now, given that we will develop more people than we actually need, we also need to educate people that there is no guarantee. However, what it does is make you much more valuable in the market. So an individual that is developed is more important for the more valuable for the organization, so the opportunities you have will be greater. More importantly, if the organization doesn't have an opportunity for you at the right time for you, then you become more valuable outside the organization. So no matter what, it's never a negative for the individual being developed. I hope that helps you. Another question we've got, what's the trend in terms of retention levels in the UAE GCC, and what are the common talent management issues in the region? Trend in terms of retention. When we were going through the economic crisis, clearly retention went up. Right now, because we're coming out of that crisis, we're seeing more movement. It also depends on the talent segment. So if you look at Emiratization or nationalization, because we know there is a shortage in the market of nationals, no matter which GCC country we're looking at, retention of nationals is always more of a challenge because there are more opportunities out there. So if an organization doesn't capture the hearts and minds of those individuals that are being developed, you'll lose them. So it is important to engage with these individuals very quickly, first of all. So the trend right now is that I would suggest that retention is going to be a bigger issue within certain segments, but not with all segments. Common talent management issues in the region, the second part of your question. What you see is there being an issue in terms of people looking in the mirror. Remember, to identify talent truly, you're going to go through an assessment process. An assessment process is a full and frank look at where you are and your capabilities. Sometimes people aren't ready to look in the mirror or to hear the feedback that means. So when you have a talent management process, you're looking for mature individuals that are prepared to go through an assessment process that will tell them realistically how good they are. It will also tell them realistically where their gaps are, and it is for the company to make sure that you pick up the pieces and say, but those gaps are not a major issue. Let's look at how we'll fill those gaps. And that's quite important. So you need to be able to look at the ability for people to hear the truth, the ability for people to give feedback realistically, and the ability for people to develop those individuals that are in the talent pools in a timely manner. I hope that helps that question. We've also got a question here around, can we get a transcript? And yes, the transcript will be available. The recording will be available. And I'm assuming, let me ask the question, will we also have a transcript, written transcript? Right, we won't have a written transcript, but there will be a recording. If you need anything else, you can contact me, and I'd be happy to give you some notes, or I'll provide them through through Informa, and they can send them out. So if a lot of you would like a transcript, I won't be able to do word for word, but I can probably give you some more information. So if you'd like that, get in touch with Informa after this webinar is finished and ask for that, and we'll put something together for you. Another one, I'm completing a principalship certification and have an upcoming internship. This is great. Good. That's fantastic. Thank you very much. And then another question, what or who is critical talent? That depends on the organization. So broad brush, critical talent is usually those in leadership positions, no matter which organization you're talking about. The critical jobs are those that are in leadership positions. But there are many jobs within an organization that are key, critical positions within the organization. Two things. One, it has a significant impact on operational delivery. Or two, that the person holding that job is critical because they're the only one with the knowledge and the capability to do it. So those are the two criteria to identify a critical job, and in which case they become high priority to have within your succession management process. Critical talent is usually your leadership or those people that are in critical roles. Next question, how does job rotation to help us identify talent management? Job rotation is usually a development tool. So it's usually part of your development process that helps us to develop talent. So within talent management, job rotations will help us to understand people's readiness to be deployed. It will build awareness of different roles within the organization, and it will validate some of the talent gaps that we've identified. I hope that helps you, Mysoon. Next question, can we have some good assessments that help the whole process to be accurate? Yes, there are a bunch of assessment tools, two types. They're all psychometric tests, or psychometric assessments. One are personality profiling. And personality profiles give us a baseline. They tell us what our natural tendencies are, our natural innate abilities are, that means we are likely to be good at something. They don't tell us we are good at it. They say you're more likely to be good at this because it's something that you will enjoy, and your personality leads us to believe that someone like you will be good at X, Y, and Z. So, for example, if I do a personality profile, it will say you're great at influence and persuasion, great communicator, good at strategic thinking, not so good at figures, not so good at detail. Now, I know that that's my innate ability. That doesn't mean I won't be good operationally. It just tells us that my innate ability is this, but I can develop those skills to focus on the areas that I'm not so good if I need them in my job. So if we use me as an example again, my innate ability is not to be great at figures. However, I was an HR director, and all of you will know that as an HR director I would need to do budgeting. I would need to understand compensation and benefit. I would need to understand analysis, performance distribution, all of which is figures. Now, when we test for someone's ability, mathematical ability, that's a test, meaning it has a right or wrong answer. I will score in the middle of that, average. And that's because it's a timed process. If I had 3 hours to do that exam, I would get a much higher score. But the intention with an exam is to put someone under a little bit of pressure, and that truly tests natural innate ability. So 2 types of assessment. One, personality, which gives you your baseline. The second types of assessment are tests, ones that they're ability tests. They have right or wrong answers. So personality, things like OPQ, developed by Saville and Holdsworth, things like Hogan. A Hogan inventory I personally think is incredibly good. I like it because it's also available in Arabic, so it doesn't require you to be an English speaker, fluent English speaker. It allows you to take to report it in Arabic as well as in English. It's also available in a number of other languages. For non-leadership level, the Thomas International DISC profile is quite good. I wouldn't use it at leadership level. I'd use Hogan, I'd use OPQ, I'd use 16PF5. Numbers, so I hope that helps you, Sultan. I don't have enough time to go through everything, but that's a rough idea. There are many others, and again, if you want more information, my email address is on the slides. Contact me directly and I'll send you some more information. We've pretty much run out of time, so although we've got some more questions, what I will do is I will answer them in a follow-up email. Last thing I'd like to remind you of, there is the Talent Management Conference coming up in March, 22nd to the 25th of March. You've got some great speakers, a great lineup. You've also got some workshops at that conference. So might be something that you guys, if any of you are working in talent management, would like to go to, then I'd sign up to that. Or if those of you that are thinking you'd just like to know a little bit more, you can do that. Look at the Informa website. Take a look at the other, which is informa.me. You can look at the HR courses on there. You'll be able to identify upcoming talent management training courses on that. For the talent management conference, the address is www.talent-mea.com/management, and that will get you onto the website for the Talent Management and Succession Forum. Thank you very much, all of you, for your participation today. I hope you found this valuable. Bye-bye. Stop recording.